Good morning, everyone. I just want to make sure my mic is on because I know it's not during the sounds of the waves. However long that lasts, I'm going to have to watch it because after a while it stops making noises on my side. Make sure you guys can hear me. Hold on. Yes. All right. You should be able to hear me. I still have an issue with the comments loading up into the live stream. So for those that make comments, although you may not see it on the live screen, I do see it on my side. And my voice sounds funny, probably because one, it's my morning voice and my vocal cords have not opened up yet. And two, Mitchell, my nose, my sinuses are killing me. So today, what is today? I don't even know what today is. Today is Saturday, November 14th, 2020. This live stream, I wanted to talk about mental health services and why I am adding it to my practice, specifically by obtaining my master's degree in mental health counseling. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do my spiritual stuff because I absolutely am. And it also doesn't mean I'm not doing my mind fashion release because I absolutely am. Will that potentially take away from availability? Yes. But that's where I'm looking to bring people in that I trust, that I know does various types of work, such as MFR and spiritual readings, and actually thinking about a future space outside of my home again. So this session ties in my son as well, and the path that I was placed in once he passed away. So had I thought I would ever get a master's in mental health counseling? Absolutely not. I thought I was done with all of that outside of, continuing education for my massage license that I do myofascial release through. But, the world always has other intentions for us. Sometimes it is not something we're expecting, and that's usually what happens. The universe forces us down a path that we least expect. And I know it's part of our growth, and I know it's part of our healing process. I also understand it's also reaching our fullest potential that is within us that we don't always necessarily see right away or envision. So, when my son died in April of 2017, which is not that long ago, feels like a lifetime. It feels like it's been over a decade since he passed away. I know that is mostly my spiritual abilities and being in and out of their world. Time moves super fast. And since it moves super fast, then my days feel like they move extremely fast. So when he died, obviously, as any parent grieving, you find yourself lost, not sure where you want to be, where you want to go. Just taking the moment to cry. When it's your only child, it adds in everything else. Your hopes, your dreams. Not for him, because even though most parents have expectations for their kids, for me, I just wanted him to be happy. But I will say the one expectation I had was that he would have his own kids and that I'd be a grandma. I love kids, always have. I only had one due to choices I made in my life with the men that I was with prior to meeting the right one for me. Because, we all make choices based upon what we have in those moments and what we think we want. Or in my case, and anybody who has spiritual abilities, in their cases, the ability to tolerate negative people or tolerate problematic people or want to help broken people and people who need to be fixed. Never works out, but we still try until we've learned that, our spiritual abilities, this is what's going on. And, I can see you for, the pain that you're in, and that you can help yourself. I can't do that. But until we realize that, we might spend a lifetime with people in our lives that should not be a part of it because we're trying to help them to fix them. So when Morgan died, it's funny because I was just saying this the other day. One of the first things my brother said to me was, "You're not allowed to move to the Caribbean," because he knows that's where I've always dreamed to eventually be. When I retire, I want to go to the Caribbean. I love the heat. I'm always cold. I know it's from the spiritual stuff. Although menopause, even though it was medical menopause, so instantly going into it, is no joke when it comes to hot flashes and night sweats. Oh, I thought I'd enjoy those babies because I'm cold all the time. But no, they were not fun. But I enjoy the heat. And, at that point, when Morgan died, what did I have? So I remember when he said it, I just laughed and I said, Dave likes seasons. So as long as Dave and I are together, I'll be here. So as I processed, my world, so to speak, while having my own business, so not really able to crawl into a hole and die, which is a benefit. But, when you're grieving, you just want to be left alone. Once I got past the anger towards the kid that gave him the fentanyl bag, and this is a kid that called me mom, who gave me Swiper, which you guys sometimes see on the screen, is not a stranger to my home. So there's all that wrapped up into it too. With him currently sitting in jail for different reasons, but waiting trial for distribution that resulted in a death. 2 charges of that, and 2 charges for murder for my son, as well as another kid that died a month before my son did from his choices. So it's still pending. It was supposed to have a pre-trial next week, and that got canceled because of COVID. But after about 6 months, no, maybe a little less, I'm going to say 4 months, and I stopped being angry at him. I realized how much he's broken. The pain that he had from his childhood over losing important people in his life turned him to start drugs very early on, around the age of 10. He became defiant. He became outspoken. From what I understand, he was a very small child, so he was bullied a lot. And when he became a teenager, he went from this scrawny little kid to this 6'4" massive child. And so he became the bully. And he started to be aggressive towards everybody else. And as I thought about these things that I knew, about him because, again, he's not a stranger to my home. I first started to think, well, with my unique abilities of being able to see the dead, why not do grief counseling work? Because then I can help those that are grieving, no matter what the loss is, that they could talk to their loved one as well as process the grief from a mental health perspective. And in the state of Pennsylvania, there's no certificate or degree for grief counseling. It strictly is mental health counseling. So it's a master's in counseling or a PhD in psychology counseling services. So as I thought about that and not really wanting to go down a degree at all, I just kept sitting on it, processing how sad I was. I just lost Bailey, my yellow lab, and I had been preparing to lose him for years. And I kept asking him not to let me put him down. Unfortunately, he made me. So I had lost Morgan. I was going to move out of my house because the memories were too hard. But I stayed, mostly for Bailey. And then I had to put him down. And I tell you what you see today was nothing that I went through then. Losing your pet, your loved, as long as you love animals, as long as you love your pets, which most people who have them do, it was like losing my son all over again. And I realized in that moment of losing him, losing Bailey, forgiving the kid that did it. I wouldn't say forgive at that point, not be angry at him, to have some understanding. I have since forgiven him. I haven't been able to tell him yet because of waiting trial, but I have since forgiven him. But as I sat on all that, realizing I can't just do grief counseling with an easy thing, I thought about why this kid had to experience the life that he did. Now, obviously, we can't control death. We obviously can't control, we make choices before we're born, but once we're born, we can't control our parents' or our guardians' actions. And if some of our guardians and parents are in situations that result in pain towards children, then there's all that going on as well. But around that time, I also started to hear and see more parents complaining about their children regarding their actions. I was seeing more and more diagnoses of ADHD. I was hearing more and more clients saying that they were labeled bipolar. And it made me realize that I need to help these children before they're a problem, before they turn down drugs and alcohol, before they kill themselves with suicide because they feel it's the only way out, before they're bullied to suicide. We tend to talk about the person who is bullied, but we never talk about the bullier, who is only doing it because that's learned behavior, where they're acting out because they're in pain. We seem to focus only on certain areas that make sense to our little worlds. And it's logical. And as I heard from so many people, wait, your son died from that? Your son died from fentanyl? But you're a good mom. But you loved your kid. Why would your child die from that? And it shows how much we don't understand other people. Yes, I was a great mom. Yes, he hated me at times. And when he did, I told him good. Because I wasn't his friend, I was his mom in those moments. But we had a great relationship. And we loved each other more than anything. His friends still love me. And I still get to see a lot of them twice a year. And I'm so grateful for that. And yet I know it's also the love that I gave them. So I thought to myself, if somebody doesn't understand what they're going through, how can they be better? And you might be thinking from like a pain or loss perspective. In some ways, yes. Obviously, I can understand that. Never truly understood it until Morgan died. Because I could see them and experience them still. So I never fully understood the pain everybody else was experiencing until then. So I was able to be humbled quite a bit that day. My childhood wasn't the best. The kids that I work with at the group home, they're quite shocked when they see me and then hear the trauma and lifestyle that I actually had. It didn't define me. It influenced me. It shaped me to be the person I am today. But how do we go so wrong as a society when it comes to mental health, especially in today's day and age? Some of it is just no diagnosis whatsoever. Let's just ignore the problem and see if it goes away. And I get that that mentality stems from the old mentality of thinking of electroshock therapy, which does still happen, but it's refined at this point, and it's only used in extreme cases. But how many people get locked up because of being moody for so long? The stigmatism around mental health therapy is still very terrible. And that people don't feel comfortable going to see a mental health counselor because of being labeled something they're not prepared to be, or they don't want others to know. These are all the things that kind of popped in my mind all at once. And then I thought, how can I change that? How can I help others, other parents specifically, guardians, loved ones, not lose a child to drugs, suicide, or just reckless behavior? And then I thought, well, if I work on it from the inside, then I can make some vast changes when it comes to certain diagnoses. Because technically, if I went to see somebody today and I said that I talk to the dead, I hear the dead, I feel the dead, my personality changes from time to time, I can't focus, I'm forgetful, I don't sleep sometimes, I'm going to be labeled with various different diagnoses that in the end are all contributing factors to spiritual communication. Now that doesn't mean everything and every diagnosis that I'm about to say is 100% spiritual communication. There are restrictions through our cranium, our skull, that can pull and create problems with processing. There are injuries, especially traumatic brain injuries that can create and cause some of the symptoms as well. So I would never say it's 100%. And if I ever say anything similar to that, then it's just I'm not really thinking, I'm just blurting something out. But majority of the time, certain diagnoses are 100%, 100, or, see, I almost said it, see, the spirit stopped me. 99, I would say 99% spiritual activity. We're all born with it, as I've said many, many times. Some of us can ignore it. Some of us can push it away. Some of us can turn it off. Most of us turn it off. Those that can't completely turn it off maybe have it dimmed and it's on at moments of time. But we're all born with it, and we can all reopen it at any time, whether it's a traumatic experience, if it was closed off, or even just grief and sadness. It's when we're vulnerable, is when we start to really seek ourselves out and look internally as to what is wrong. So, I have been doing various things, especially working with people who have mood swings and high anxiety disorders, through my practice already, through the spiritual stuff, as well as my fascial release to make sure there's no restrictions to the head, neck, everywhere actually, because we know it's all connected. So it could even be like if they have like their toes curled in, that's going to be pulling on their head as well. But specifically, spiritually, make sure that they're not sensitive, empathic, or energy sensitive. Those people who are empathic and energy sensitive, they typically get labeled bipolar. They're feeling what other people feel, whether they're alive or dead. So they typically have that as well as anxiety. Every person who is spiritually connected has some form of level of anxiety that comes from nowhere. It could be magnified by our stress in life because, let's face it, as long as we're still alive, we're still affected. I don't care who you are. You still will go through things. So, would it be magnified? Absolutely. If you're sad because something physically happened in your life, yeah, you're sad. But being spiritually connected, now that sadness is magnified by however many spirits that are around you that are feeling the same way you are. So instead of just being sad, now you're extra sad. You're extra moody. You're extra mood swing. You're extra from one extreme to the other. And even though I was working with that and working with kids that still had their abilities open so they could get some sleep and they weren't terrified of their rooms, night terrors, that's a diagnosis as well in the mental health community. When most of the time night terrors is you definitely have spiritual abilities and your mind doesn't know how to process the spiritual activity around you as well as the communication, so it turns into a terror, a night terror, as you're trying to figure it out subconsciously. So I was working with that already. Obviously not labeling it, but just working on it so that way kids can sleep in their rooms and not be fearful. And I know some of you might even be thinking, well, that's a kid response. No, there's things under the bed. There are things in the closet. There's no reason to be afraid of the dark until there is reasons to be afraid of the dark. Imaginary friends are spirits. So, as I thought about all this stuff and processed it all, I thought, well, if I could stop the grief by it not happening, then maybe that's the path I should go down. And open up and keep open our natural born abilities to be connected and to be communicating with the world around us. It'll help heal us as well and not seek out distractions and avoidance and pain upon others, even if we don't mean it and we lash out. There are times that the spirits spoke through me. I didn't even realize. And the person next to me is like, why did you say that? And meanwhile, I didn't think I said anything. I was sitting there quietly. But that is just them using me as a tool. And yet the words I said might have hurt that person. It wasn't on purpose, intentional. It just happened. But they needed to hear it, even if it hurt them, so they could process and work through. So, while working, various things with other children, including kids that are disassociated, these are children that can speak, absolutely can move around, can process things, maybe not even in preschool or anything like that. So let's say like between, 3 and 5. And you sit there and you talk to your kid and they just completely stare at you and ignore everything about you. Or their personality seems to shift from one thing to another. If they were to go see a traditional mental health counselor, especially a psychiatrist or psychologist, they would then probably be labeled with a dissociated psychiatric disorder. Multiple personalities have been changed to a DID, dissociated identity disorder. Yet, for me, when I meet so far every person I've ever met, but again, I'm not saying 100%, they are spiritually connected. I see the ghost around them, and I see their lights are on. They're open for business to listen to the spiritual activity around them. So with certain people, their personalities completely change. And those that has had a reading with me or a group reading with me, they've probably seen it. Where I start acting like that person's loved one with the words that I say, maybe my mannerisms, maybe even just some of the slang words that I would use, or even the highly sophisticated words, which those that know me personally, I very rarely use big words. But traditional diagnoses would say that I have DID. Or I'm having a psychotic disorder. I'm not, but that's what we're being labeled from a mental health perspective. And mostly because nobody is in the mental health world showing this is a potential alternative to what somebody's experiencing. So bipolar usually is empathic people. They feel what other people feel. Now, empath is just a channel as we talk about, various different things. It's just another channel that people can tune into. Somebody who is DID, they're really communicating. They, allow spirits to come into their body, maybe even channel it, can maybe even act out as that person would, as we've seen when we think about multiple personality disorder, which is what it used to be called. That is, because the spirit's in there. The body is just a shell for the soul. So if the soul can climb walls, like we saw in that one movie, which was phenomenal, I'm trying to remember the movie, but I'll think of it. But could it be possible? Maybe. It seems far-fetched and it seems crazy, but maybe. We don't know. Because in the end, everything's energy. It's why when those that do myofascial release and they're treating people and their body wants to lift up or their body wants to come off the table, and here you have a 200-pound man that you're trying to guide safely to the floor. Yet, for some reason, it's simple and almost weightlessness, even though it's not. But yet, it feels that way. So, energy is energy. And it manipulates in many different ways. One of the other diagnoses that could be spiritual, and I'm looking through my DSM-5 book, because again, as a counselor, I'm going to have to be able to go back and forth in this book to show and prove aspects. So schizophrenia, that is also under the spectrum of psychiatric disorder. Specifically with schizophrenia, you're talking about delusions and hallucinations. I have them all the time. As long as I'm open for communication. I see things, I hear things, I smell things. I will even ask people that I'm around, do you smell that? Do you hear that? Did you hear that? Do you see that? Yet, this is something that others get labeled schizophrenia and then put on medication that may or may not work. That also may be damaging their brain and the rest of their psyche, because now they're completely vulnerable and unprotected. And meanwhile, all they had to do was push it away, white light it. Even if they wanted nothing to do with the abilities to be able to hear, to communicate, you at least have to get it under control and stop what's happening. Another diagnosis that I plan to work with is, where was the other one? I made notes before. We talked about bipolar, and that's various because I know there's different degrees of bipolar. You just get to a point of extreme. Separation anxiety. That's one that most people haven't thought about. But yet, it's simple. Unless the person had an extreme trauma or any kind of trauma, that their association that being alone with or being fearful of a home invasion or a fire or something like that, where when they're alone and vulnerable, it could happen again, then chances are it's spiritual communication as well. They're feeling what the other spirits around. And typically separation anxiety is a secondary disorder that's associated with all those other ones that I just spoke about, as well as various ones throughout. And I'm curious over time, if as I look at all these and experiencing these diagnoses and experience clients with them, if they are not the secondary to spiritual communication. As well as our traumas that we're trying to run from instead of embracing. The other one that I did that one, the DID. All right, that's there. I thought there was one more. OCD. That combination of a lot of things. The inability to control our world, right? So we have to control something. And so we might clean aggressively for, everything. Everything has to be in its place. Is that our upbringing? Maybe. Is it trauma? Maybe. Is it spiritual communications? Maybe. And it's identifying what that is. So, by bringing mental health counseling into my Body Soul Wellness Center, I'm able to look at the mind, the body for physical pain, as well as trauma through my fascia release, as well as the soul, our spiritual abilities, our connection to our body, and truly treat somebody from as a whole for all those things, a one-stop shop that we tend to have not gotten to find in our current society. That you go to this doctor for this, and you go to physical therapy for that, and you go to a spiritual medium for this, or mental health counselor for that. Like, it's all so many areas of do this, do that, don't do this, that we've lost the connection, the oneness of who we are as a person, as well as who we are to this world. So, I plan to change our mental health aspect, not only the stigmatism of it, but also create my own branch within mental health therapy and the approaches that are out there. And if you Google search, there's a lot of them. There's some main ones, like Carl Rogers and let's see, Jungians, which is, I switched up the terms versus name versus, whatever. But there's so many out there. When in the end, it's all the same. It's just different approaches. But to work in that world, I need to have all the terms and all the aspects of what does that mean and how does that look, right? So the closest one to the approach that I would utilize is called transpersonal therapy. And it talks about past, basically taking it past the Jungian's approach to mental health therapy and doing more with the spiritual connection. But it's not written in the way that it's like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. Like you're talking the spirit. It's not that. It talks about more of our egos and the superego and the id ego, like all the egos of Jungian practices, and takes it past that to the spirit, basically the spiritual ego and where we fit within the world from an energy spiritual perspective. So it branches into what I'm doing, but I realized over the past 2.5 years, 3 years, that it really will become its own branch off of transpersonal therapy. Because I got to start somewhere. So that's the most logical. So as this changes and as this shifts, and as we can get to our children at such a young age to avoid being put on medications for ADHD, separation anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia as a teenager, OCD, DID, all these labels that may or may not be there. Lessening autistic children's sensitivity response. Because when it comes to autism, yeah, that's a dysfunction and that's something going on within the brain. Could it be the fascia? Absolutely. A birthing trauma, things like that. Could be many things. But it can be lessened. Children with Down syndrome, that is a physical limitation. That is, unfortunately, a physical aspect of what they were born with. But anybody who has any disabilities, especially as children, limitations, physically, sometimes mentally, they are absolutely still communicating, and they will communicate their entire life. So for any parents out there, look at the video to white light. Start protecting your children who have diagnoses of any of the things that I said, but especially any physical limitations or mental limitations, because they will always stay connected. And if you can lessen their world around them, then they will be able to communicate easier, and they will also be able to be less sensitive to their environment and the world. One of the other things I'm starting to realize, and I hope to be able to prove or show, is that it's called now cognitive dysfunction, but it's the umbrella of bipolar, not bipolar, see, spirits are starting to chime in because they want me to tell somebody something. Alzheimer's or dementia. And if I'm saying that wrong, tomato, at this point, it is what it is. I know eventually I'll have to say it appropriately depending on who I'm talking to, but cognitive dysfunction, it wouldn't surprise me if I end up being labeled with that later on in life, because I already feel like I already have those symptoms, because when I'm communicating, I don't remember things. The more that I communicate, the more that I'm in their world, I feel stupid. I feel like I've lost stuff. If I need to read something or study for something, I have to push them away. Otherwise, it will not sink in. It's the white noise that just never ends. Information constantly processing, but yet you're not hearing it and you're not taking it in, at least on a conscious level. But yet it fills your mind and fills the voids. And it's also the reason that those that have those issues, after napping or sleeping, they might have a very clear 15, 20 minutes before they start to lose their mind again. When we're on the other side, we know everything, we see everything. So the clarity is there. But then as soon as they come back into their physical body, it's the great forgetfulness. So eventually I know I'll be able to provide some information regarding that. Because every person I've known that's been diagnosed with that, they're sensitive in some way. Even if they didn't realize it, or even if they blocked it their whole life. Because you can't completely block 100% unless it's turned off. And then if it's turned off naturally, woohoo, and that is awesome. If it's turned off from a chakra perspective due to protection, it doesn't stop them from coming around you. You just no longer experience it and sense it to know that it's there. They're still affecting you. They're still causing stress and anxiety. They're still causing claustrophobia issues. They're still causing the biggest one that I still deal with to today, actually two I deal with today, is the need to run away, to just run, to just go somewhere else. There's nowhere to go. It's just everything's gonna follow me. But it's the feeling to get out, to leave, just get away from everyone and everything, even though I'm all by myself. The other aspect, and this is, it's weird, but for those of you that have children out there who you feel like they don't care or don't understand why they have everything and yet they feel like they have nothing, or that they feel like they're not loved or cared for. When you are spiritually communicating, especially on a high level basis, such as myself, you don't feel what other people feel. You feel their pains, you feel their emotion, but you don't feel their love. There's too many spirits around. I know people in my life love me for various degrees and various reasons. Do I feel it? No. I'd say good 90% of the time, I do not feel it. It is the reason that I touch everything. I will walk down a store aisle and touch every piece of clothing as I walk. It is how I am connected to our physical world. So people in my life, if they don't tell me they love me or touch me, I don't feel it. I know it. I have to tell myself, I have to remind myself they do, especially when I'm feeling like they don't, or that, it's so easily they're going to walk away or easily walk out of my life when I care so much about them. But I understand that about me. But those that are connected and still listening, they don't understand that. It's another reason they seek out alternatives to feel, whether it's sex all the time, whether it's drinking, whether it's alcohol, which was the same thing. I don't know why I said that. I guess because, that makes sense, because some of us can get addicted to soda and a certain drink. It doesn't have to be alcohol. Drugs, marijuana, the need to hit something, the need to touch something all the time. Is it 100% that? No. But if you're communicating and your abilities are on, yeah, it definitely adds to it. So, how do you know? How do you know if it's just trauma? How do you know if you're spiritually connected? Outside of knowing that you see things or feel things or sense things or hear things or whatever. Obviously, those things might make you think, well, maybe I have abilities. The simplest thing is you white light, you protect your space, you protect your world, you kick everything out that is not your immediate family and friends from a spiritual perspective by removing all negative energy, all ill will. And if you get better and things are better within 2 weeks and you doing that every day for 2 weeks, then you might want to seek somebody out that can assist you on how to control your abilities permanently. Or maybe work with them depending on how sensitive you are, because you'll never be able to get away from it. Because you can white light, because that's how you control it, and you can put those words out there and use that only immediate family and friends because I'm not going to do anything with this. That's fine. You're going to need to do it for the rest of your life. Doesn't mean every day for the rest of your life, because over time your rules get put up and the intentions are there and the walls are there. The energy wall gets put up, the energy bubble, whatever we want to call it. And then you only need to do it when things are off or things are wrong or things are outside of the rules, such as being woken up. But you will need to do it. And if you have small children, you need to do it for them almost every day. Because until a person can take control of their own energy worlds, they need help. But depending on the age, you won't want to tell them. They'll be afraid of it. You can approach it as it's energy work and not talk about spirits, but let's just add our own protective personal bubble. We talk about our personal bubbles all the time, but yet we don't really understand what that means or how to affect it or how to move close to it. And that's pretty much it. That's how you do it. It's no big secret. It's just you need to know how bad your world is, how strong your communication is, what are you most listening to that's affecting you, and then what do you need to do to control it. And if you never want to do anything with it, you don't have to. It's a choice. Because let me tell you, it is a blessing to be able to see my son and to be able to communicate for everybody else and help everyone else, especially if somebody has abilities or not, to not be labeled something or go on medication for something that's just a natural ability. But it's a curse. Just from seeing my son alone and my niece, it reminds you of the pain that they're not here, physically here to touch, which, as I just said earlier, I need to touch to feel love. But it's also a curse because it's like you're always working. You're always on. You can't tune out. You can't shut down. And then you have people who ask you, outside of booking appointments and schedules, this happened, or can you look at this, or can you do this? Can you tell me what this person thinks? It's a very lonely life. It really feels like that majority of the time. Even when you have people in your world, in your house. Physical people, not the spirits. And it can make you feel like you're insane sometimes. So I understand these diagnoses. And I understand that some of them absolutely could be due to trauma, due to physical injury, due to fascia restrictions. I absolutely understand all of that. But I also understand the aspect that's not out there yet. And so that's my goal. My goal is to change this thought process, to help the kids before they become so hurt and so lost that their actions affect others, such as the case of my son. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I got my master's. Woohoo. I finished last Sunday. I keep feeling like I'm missing something and I have schoolwork to do. But, when you've been doing it for over 2 years, that kind of mindset, you got to get out of it. I can't work on my own yet because I'm not a licensed professional. In the state of Pennsylvania, I need 3,000 hours working under somebody else. So I can't bring it back to my business yet. And yet, at the same time, I desperately want to. I want to be able to get some grants put together so that way I could do some studies. And if I can get it to work out the way that I envision it, I will list it under the charity I made for my son called Morgan's Light. I'm working on everything, but I want to be able to offer free services to children in need, to be able to stop these diagnoses and to help them navigate the challenging world that so many adults do not understand anymore. So anybody who's good at writing grants or know how to navigate it, if you can reach out to me, that would be awesome. And we can start to look at some of those things. We can barter services or something. Even though I don't have my license yet. That'll take at least 2 years. But anybody out there who's a licensed practicing counseling with some supervisory experience that would like to work with me on this, absolutely reach out to me, because that is how I can bring it back to the mental health community world a lot faster than waiting 2 years for it to be in my practice and then start from there. So my world got much more complicated and much more bigger. But if my son didn't die, I would not be saying these words to you today. I would not be working with the kids at the group home around the corner, which are the kids that would have been my son's friends. My son had a huge heart like mine, except for certain people that he didn't like for various reasons. But yeah, these kids would have been in my home. They're good kids. They're just lost and in pain. So that's why I did what I did. That's why I went on this path. And I am ecstatic, and I'm looking forward to being able to help these future children. Because in a lot of ways, that is how I will see grandkids for me. Because I know a lot of these kids will stay in touch with me and share their lives, share their children with me. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait. So, I've already forgotten who the person was that had tried to communicate earlier and throwing stuff in my face about something. So, what we'll do is next Saturday, I'll do readings again since, clearly there were some people who wanted to do some conversations. Maybe we'll see. We'll see what I do the following weekend, but we'll definitely do communications next weekend. I might split it up between 30 minutes of communication and maybe 30 minutes of something else, maybe self-help, some techniques for manifest release, which I really haven't done yet, mostly because of a camera perspective. It's a little hard to show certain techniques, but I can obviously describe them, and then you guys can do some. So for those of you that want to see that, send me your questions as to which area of pain and issues you have, and something you can do at home, and I will tell you what you can do. But otherwise, I'll go for the basic ones, which are migraines, upper shoulder, upper back pain, because let's face it, most of us sit behind the computer all day. So our shoulders are rounding, our chest is closing in on itself. Low back pain, which again is the same thing from sitting. But yeah, so send me what you're thinking, and we'll do that. And if I get a lot of response, then the MFR stuff we'll do whatever I can get in, and then we'll run over into the next session with that. So I appreciate everybody being on here. I appreciate you all letting me share my crying tears to release some of the tension. The upcoming holidays have been hard for me. So I'm sure a lot of that is that as well. And then also finding out yesterday that Morgan's case is again rescheduled due to COVID outbreak in the prison. So they're all quarantined to their cells and cannot make video appearances or anything. And as you can all imagine, it's just another piece of the case that is pending closure. But mostly for me, there are some things I want to say to the kid, to not only help myself, but then also to hopefully help him move forward and be better. So we will see. Enjoy your Saturday. It looks like a beautiful day outside. I'm not sure if it is, but it looks like it.